Chapter 1 is entitled Existing Pipe Defects and How They Affect Installations. This is the start of the course, and this chapter typically takes us approximately 1 to 2 hours of instruction, depending upon questions and student interaction. The purpose of this is to provide the inspector with a basic knowledge of existing pipe conditions and how they will affect the installed CIPP. In so doing, we also touch upon the pipeline assessment coding system and teach them to look at pipes with respect to that system so that they can understand, first off, that cured in place can be installed in a variety of shapes and configurations. They're not always perfect rifle barrels. And also, CIPP has been installed in existing pipelines in excess of 2,500 feet in length. The levels of pipeline collapse, however, may dictate where the CIPP may not be able to effectively renew the old pipe. And finally, we want to note that they need to understand the concept behind CIPP is the existing pipe is the mold for the new pipe. And so therefore, when you look at these existing conditions as they are, dependent upon what they look like is what your finished CIPP is going to look like. Let's look at that a little bit closer with some of the slides that we used from the presentation. First up is broken pipe. Broken pipe is by definition a pipe that has become cracked or fractured and the pieces have started to move or be displaced. The CIPP can obviously be installed when the pipe is broken, but the displaced pipe sections will obviously reflect in the final installed product. As you can see on your screen, that pipe is going to show some of the host pipe when you do the finished product. We don't get into the tolerances that may vary from customer to customer to what degree broken pipe may still be a candidate for CIPP. We just want to talk about the fact that what you see with the form is somewhat what you're going to see in the finished product. In the second example, infiltration, we talk to the students about the fact that CIPP can be effectively installed with minor infiltrations such as what we define as weepers, drippers, and some runners. That's terminology, again, from the pipeline assessment coding system. We also talk about the fact that there's a lot of misrepresentation about resin washout, being that with the new resin technologies that we have today, resin washout is less of a problem than it was, say, 10 years ago. But that being said, the students will learn about technical solutions for pipes having large amounts of infiltration, which should be controlled before installing the CIPP, either such as grouting or a pre-liner. And the final example that I'd like to show you from Chapter 1 is protruding connections. Protruding service connections should be cut back to within 1/2 to 1 inch of the sewer pipe wall before installing the CIPP. In the class, we go into great detail with the students about available technologies that are typically used for removing protruding connections before installing a CIPP. So as they require this of the installing contractor, they can be very comfortable at just how much effort they're putting on the contractor to do the job.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We'll go now to Chapter 2. Chapter 2, this is Jerry Munchmeyer again. Chapter 2 is a overview of the CIPP technology. The purpose of this chapter is to give the inspector a much better understanding of all of the aspects of the CIPP technology. And typically, time for this will range somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. Again, it depends on the size of the class and the number of questions and student interaction that we find. The inspector will learn about the technology from raw materials to wet out of the tube to installation to proper curing methods. The several slides here to give you a little flavor of what's in the course. We do discuss the tube material. The inspector learns about different tube materials and how they are fabricated to meet the customer's specification requirements. We also discuss such things as coatings, reinforcing materials are discussed, and how they apply to the CIPP. The second slide looks at a typical wet out, what we call a factory wet out installation, where a tube is the dry tube is saturated with the selected resin material. The inspector learns about the process of impregnating the resin, how the resin actually gets into the dry tube. We talk about one of the more common, longest used system, which is the vacuum impregnation, but discuss other methods that are now available in the market that other manufacturers of this type of technology are using today. The next slide goes into a similar situation, except this is for a field wet out, gives you a flavor of the size of a field wet out. We talked pretty extensively on the field wet out operation. The inspector learns about the process of impregnating the resin material in the dry tube in an outside or an environmental outside environment, while at the same time the pipe or the liner is being installed into the existing pipe. So the field wet out is quite a bit more complicated in that the entire not only the wet out and installation process and curing process are all one continuous process out in the field. Chapter 2 is quite more extensive than that. This gives you a general flavor of some of the aspects of it. We get into all the other aspects of cured in place pipe. But I'll turn it back over to Ed, and he'll give you a brief overview of Chapter 3. So, Ed?
Chapter 3 is entitled The Field Installation of CIPP. And if you've been keeping up, you'll note that the previous 2 chapters took us to the lunch break. And so we're actually starting Chapter 3 in the afternoon. And you can see from your screen there that we have typically estimated about 3 or 4 hours to deliver this part of the instruction, depending upon the questions and student interaction. My personal experience has been it's typically 4 hours, and occasionally even goes into the next day. It's that good an area. This is the meat of the training, and in this part of the course, the inspector is going to learn all about the field installation of CIPP, from the setup and delivery of the liner to the installation and curing, and to the final the evaluation of the final product for any defects that might be present, and structural compliance with the contract documents. And I might say that for those of you who've sat through an afternoon class before, it's lively enough and the interaction is good enough that I've really taken note that we don't see heads nodding off in the afternoon on this session. It's really that good. And the pictures that we show them are really demonstrative of what they need to know. And so let me show you a few of those so you can see what we're giving them. First off, here's a slide from the course that's called Pre-Installation Line Flushing. And you'll note in the bottom of that slide it says Inspector Action. These will be throughout Chapter 3, where we're telling the inspector key things that he should be doing or she should be doing in order to make sure that they get a good job with cured in place pipe. And one of the very primary things that you need to do to get as good an open barrel pipe as you can is you need to have the contractor run a CCTV camera down the pipeline immediately prior to doing the liner. Things happen overnight, or things happen a week from when the actual cleaning was done, and in brick sewers, bricks fall out of place. So it's really important that this be done, and the inspector should be present to note that. The next slide shows you samples for testing. We go over not only the restrained sample that you see in the picture on the left, but also the flat plate sample that you see on the right. The inspector action there is that you do need to obtain samples of the cured liner directly from the contractor on the project site. We go through what you can take from the samples as they're prepared, and also what the limitations are for what these samples can give you. But like anything that's cured on the site, it's really important that you do take samples and you follow through with the testing of that.